Nel nome del Padre, Figliolo, Spirito Santo. Amen.
Such a separation.
So thank you all for joining us. Once again, I'm Reverend Tony Ponticello, happy to be here. I also want to make sure that I thank everybody who's joining us, who's watching a video later, either on YouTube or on BitChute or maybe on Rumble. Please be sure to subscribe to whatever channel you are viewing us on. I'm beginning to believe that we are being shadow banned on YouTube. So if you have difficulty finding us, remember that my videos are on the other platforms as well, because I'm getting substantially more views on the other platforms, which doesn't make any sense considering the other platforms are substantially smaller. So this kind of stuff goes on. Title of my talk today, Bringing Healing to the World That Doesn't Want It. So earlier in my life, and I call this my period BC, which for me means before the course. So in Tony Ponticello BC, I would have thought everybody desired to be healed. I thought everybody desired to be healed. I didn't think anybody particularly wanted to be sick or have problems or lack in their lives. However, now, 42 years into my study and practice of A Course in Miracles, I have seen that this is indeed not so. That actually a vast majority of people, including all of us at times, are actively deciding for sickness and death. And I think it's important to be aware of this. And the Course obviously thinks it's important to be aware of this because it keeps telling us this. Here's a quote. It says, "Those who fear death see not how often and how loudly they call to it and bid it come to save them from communication." So we think we don't want death. We think maybe we're even afraid of death, but we're calling to it loudly to come and give us what we think is going to be some kind of salvation, some sort of freedom. Another place Course in Miracles talks about that we're singing this dirge. A dirge is a song or a tune that is played at a funeral dirge. So we're singing this dirge about sickness and death, and it's actually something that we want. Now, nobody likes this teaching in A Course in Miracles. Nobody really wants to embrace the responsibility that they're bringing about all of their problems themselves, and that they're bringing about their own possibly inevitable death and destruction. But indeed, this is what A Course in Miracles teaches. And at a certain point, and this is a fairly advanced A Course in Miracles group, I would say. At a certain point and at certain times, you have to really just get it and embrace it. The Course says, certainly sickness does not appear to be a decision, nor would anyone actually believe he wants to be sick. So A Course in Miracles knows how difficult this idea is going to be, and that it doesn't appear that we make active choices to be sick, nor does it appear that we make active choices to die. Yet, A Course in Miracles tells us that is exactly what is going on. And so this affects, of course, how we handle our own lives, but it also should be a foundational place we rest on when we're trying to extend healing to other people, which, of course, A Course in Miracles tells us is really important to do. And that we tend to think we're extending healing to people who want to be healed. But in truth, we're extending healing to people who are actively choosing to be sick and don't want to be healed. And we have to get through all of that. So people are actively choosing, including ourselves, not to be healed and to be ill. And sometimes you are able, and we are able to give ourselves a respite from sickness, or maybe even to give other people a respite from sickness. But if it doesn't include any fundamental thinking or conceptualization of self changes, whatever healing that does happen is always going to be temporary. I remember reading something in some esoteric literature talking about the life of Jesus as talked about in the Bible. And it was talked about that the Bible has a lot of stories of Jesus healing people. But what the Bible doesn't say is that almost all of these people, not too long after they were healed, again developed a sickness or a problem or a disease or a death, regardless. So they were given a little bit of a respite, which is good. I mean, any respite from sickness is a good thing. But unless it really involves some sort of fundamental change, it isn't going to be any kind of permanent healing. And I think all of us want some sort of permanent healing. I mean, we'll take whatever respites we get, but we want permanent healing too. Course in Miracles says, and this was in the reading that Rudy read, certainly sickness does not appear to be a decision, nor would anyone believe he actually wants to be sick. I read that before, so, let's get it. Let's take it in. It certainly doesn't seem this way, but yet it is indeed this way. And we don't tell people this necessarily. Maybe we don't even tell ourselves this sometimes, but at a certain point we have to sink down into that fundamental teaching. It goes on with the same idea in another place. It says, these patients do not realize that they have chosen sickness. On the contrary, they believe that sickness has chosen them, nor are they open-minded on this part. The body tells them what to do and they obey. They have no idea how insane this concept is. So there isn't even an open-mindedness usually on the part of the sick that they are doing this to themselves. The body is telling them what's so. The body is telling them that it's weak. The body is telling them that it's finite. The body is telling them that it is limited, and they believe it. They say, this is me. I am my body. My body hurts. Therefore, I am hurt. It's always a big shift if you can get to that point where you say, the body feels pain. Or even my body feels pain instead of I feel pain. That I feel pain means we've identified with the body. So we can be having body experiences, but not necessarily be identified with the body. And that's always a good place at least to start. Not identification with the body. You don't have to deny the body experience, but don't make that you. That's an experience of your body. Course says healing will always stand aside when it would be seen as threat. The instant it is welcome, it is there. Okay, so if we want fundamental change, what we have to do is really work on welcoming healing, welcoming wholeness. So how do we increase the welcome? I think that's really the fundamental question, and the question that we all really need to engage ourselves with. We have to increase the welcome. We have to fundamentally change our internal dialogue so that we are continually welcoming our wholeness, welcoming our peace, welcoming our perfection, welcoming our infinite, strong, eternal nature. Course says very gently, they, meaning the teachers God, call to their brothers to turn away from death. Behold, you, Son of God, what life can offer you. Would you choose sickness in place of this? So we have to become, if we're really going to be a healer, such a wonderful demonstration of the joy of wholeness and the joy of embracing our infinite eternal selves that people will indeed want it. That they will say, yeah, I want that life. I want what life can offer. I want what you seem to be reflecting. Maybe I won't take it in exactly the same way, but there is indeed something about you that is appealing or attractive. And I want to find out what that is, because I want that too. That's increasing the motivation for change. And that's the only thing that will ever induce any kind of permanent healing in ourselves or anyone else. We have to increase that motivation for change, and we do that by really being the change, being that wonderful demonstration of wholeness and perfection and joy. How much joy do we exude? Of Course in Miracles repeats this same motivation teaching in another place. It says, increasing motivation for change in the learner is all that the teacher need do to guarantee change. That's all that we need to do. Make the person want the change. They got to want to change the way that they're thinking about themselves and the way that they are thinking about the world. And it's a challenge, because the world kind of trains us to lead with our issues and lead with our problems. We get together with somebody, first thing we talk about is the things that are problematic, the challenges we have, or we're having right now. Rarely do we, get together and talk about the great things going on. We talk about the problems that are going on. There are great things going on in the world all the time. And if I'm just talking about the problems, I'm missing that opportunity to getting people to increase their motivation for change. Great things happened in the world for me this week. And since I talked about the problem on and off, I certainly want to talk about the great things. As of yesterday, October 1st, the country of Canada dropped all of its restrictions about COVID-19 traveling across the border to the U.S. So you no longer have to show any proof of vaccination when you're crossing the U.S. border in either direction. Now, this is really interesting because if you remember, the Freedom Truckers last spring, this big convoy of truckers that were, criticized and attacked by the government physically, and their bank accounts were frozen. A lot of things happened. That's all that they wanted. They wanted the freedom to be able to go across the U.S. border without having to show proof of vaccination, because some of them were choosing not to be vaccinated, and this was affecting their livelihood. Well, as of yesterday, there is no more requirement for anybody to show proof of vaccination when crossing the border with Canada. So, in my mind, because I'm really a champion of freedom, this is a great thing. Another, great thing in the same vein was this week the New York City schools dropped their vaccine mandate for students playing interscholastic sports and other extracurricular activities. So they had dropped the mandate for attending the school, but you still needed to show proof of vaccination if you were on a sports team or you were doing these extramural activities. But they got served a cease and desist letter from the Informed Consent Action Network, which I'm aware of. And then right after that, they dropped it. So, more freedom is happening. And, I love that. I'm all for that. I think, people should be able to do whatever they want. They should be able to get vaccinated if they want to get vaccinated. But, mandate these things and prevent the freedom of people, I always saw that as a sickness of the society. And that's healing a little bit. I mean, these are good things. That's wonderful for me, for my perception of things. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about that healing. It also means COVID is becoming less of a problem. And I'm excited about that too. So I actually believe that the work that I did and other people did actually healed that stuff. And that's how powerful this work is. We were going down a pathway and now we're coming back. And I'm absolutely, joyful about that. So, what do we share when we show up? Do we share the problem or do we share what we see as healing? Well, I try to share what I see as healing. And how do we show up? How do we show up personally? I've always been a person that likes to be well groomed. I like to dress up a little bit. I've talked about that. My mother dressed me up as a kid, especially every Sunday when we went to church. We put on our best Sunday clothes and we dressed up, and I always took that with me. I was always, even as a teenager and as a young adult, I liked to dress up. I had a lot of sport coats and dress shirts and ties, and I frequently wore those. Now as a minister, as you see, I got my priest collar on. Before I wore the priest collar, I always wore a tie, a long tie, sometimes a bow tie, wear a little jewelry. I'm groomed. I got the little beard grooming mustache thing going on here. This takes a while, This isn't just, it doesn't just manifest on your face like this. I have to work at it. But I want to put my best foot forward. How do I want to show up? I want to show up looking good and feeling good. And that's what, communicates that to me. If you think about it, there's a tendency right now, really, with our youth, to want to look poor. Every time I see that, I go, what is that? Why do people want to look poor? Especially young girls. Why do they show up, teenage girls or women in their 20s with these ripped and torn jeans? It's like, sometimes I'll be walking down the street with Deuce Althea and I said, oh, let me stop. That poor woman, she doesn't have enough money for a pair of pants. I just need to give her $30 so she can go buy a pair of pants. But you think about it, we're living in a society that wants to look poor? I don't think that's a good image. We're also living in a society that wants to sometimes look like we're dying or dead. The goth look is kind of a look of somebody who's sick or dying. I don't know if you remember, if you're, Dune, or certainly the first Dune movie, or if you're familiar, if you read the book. The villain, I've Baron something, I can't remember his name. The villain in the piece, he would put diseases on his face, so he would have all little pussy pustules of oozing disease, because that was the fashion or something. He wanted to look diseased. And I think we're one step away from that. When we want to look poor, what's next? And we want to look like we're dead and dying, looking diseased is probably right around the corner as something that would be considered high fashion. It really shows, the poor state of our culture. I certainly don't want to look like that. I want to put forth my best foot and my most joyful foot. I have a lot of things to say and a lot of things I'm concerned about, but I want to be able to present those in a context of these are the challenges that I'm healing. And I'm grateful for all of that healing. So I want to express my peace. I want to express my joy. I want to express my health. I want to express my abundance. I live an abundant life, and it's good. I want to make a demonstration about that. I want to increase people's motivation for change. And if they see me and identify with me as a spiritual person who studies A Course in Miracles, been studying it for a long time, and does their best to embrace these principles, and if my health and abundance and my joy and my peace is a demonstration of what these principles can accomplish, that increases their motivation to embrace these principles themselves. It says that here's another quote that says, again, very similar thing. All good teachers realize that only fundamental change will last, but they do not begin at that level. Strengthening motivation for change is their first and foremost goal. It is also their last and final one. So strengthening motivation for change is our first goal. It's our final goal. So in the middle, there's a little time to do some teaching, maybe. But it's not the most important thing. So, teaching's important, but the most important thing, the first thing we lead with, and then what we end with, is our joy and our peace and our health and our abundance, because that's what's going to strengthen that motivation for change. And I think that is indeed what we need to do. A lot of people have, in the Course in Miracles community, have embraced this idea that it's all about an internal shift. It's not about anything external. So it's not really about your life externally getting any better. And I've always, reacted kind of negatively to that, because if my external life is a mirror reflection of my internal life, how can my external life not get better if my internal life is getting better? It has to. It's a mirror reflection of it. And so I think this tendency in the Course in Miracles community to feel like really sheepish about saying about anything in their external life that's getting better, because, I don't know, because it seems unspiritual to them, or God forbid they should be perceived as if they were bragging or something like that. I think they're missing the point. That's what's going to strengthen people's motivation to change. And it's important to express those things. It's important to show up, dress up, maybe. What's the dress code of a Zoom meeting? Clothes. Just, clothes. And half the people turn their cameras off, which only means, I guess, they're naked. I don't know. So, you think about it. How do we show up? How do we present ourselves? I remember, and it's still popular, the Muslim movement that went through the African American community, the Black Muslim movement. Those guys, men and women, they dressed up. They were taught to dress up. The men always had, suits on, or at least sport coats and long ties. The women were always dressed nice. They were dressed up because that's what they wanted to show people, that, this study of theirs, this religion of theirs was helping them in their lives. That's still, it will always be good fashion to look good. I'm sorry. I know some people think you can look poor with ripped jeans, or look like you haven't come out of your cellar in the basement. You must be a vampire with the goth look, or whatever it is, or maybe even look diseased. But it's never going to catch on like looking good is going to catch on. Looking good is always good. Okay, Course says, turning the other cheek means that you cannot be hurt and do not want to show your brother anything except your wholeness. You don't really want to show our sisters and our brothers and our others anything except our absolute wholeness and our abundance and our health. The Course says, look about the world and see the suffering there. Is not your heart willing to bring your weary brothers rest? They must await your own release. They suffer pain until you have denied its hold on you. They die till you accept your own eternal life. So our brothers and sisters and the others are waiting for us to heal ourselves and to show that healing and to demonstrate that healing, and that's when they will be healed. And actually their healing is a reflection of theirs. Back in the 70s, and maybe a little bit of the 80s, there was a very popular African-American preacher, an evangelical preacher, very successful. His name was Reverend Ike. I don't know if any of you remember Reverend Ike. And he was around the country, but he, in the majority of his main ministry, he bought a large movie theater in northern Manhattan and turned it into his church. And he had a nationwide radio show, and he reached many television markets. And I had several Reverend Ike cassette tapes, and I used to listen to them. Now, Reverend Ike gets criticized a lot because he was too prosperity consciousness for some people's tastes. But I always liked Reverend Ike. I mean, he was very uplifting to listen to. And he said something very interesting about abundance and prosperity. He says, the best thing you can do for the poor is not be one of them. So, the best thing you can do for the poor is not be one. And the best thing you can do for the poor is to demonstrate your abundance, because that will inspire them to demonstrate their own abundance. Now, that doesn't mean that you should never be charitable, but you know something? You can't be truly charitable if you're not abundant. So the best thing you can do for the poor is to not be poor yourself. That way you're abundant, and that way you can be truly charitable to them. But also you can demonstrate through your abundance that people can be abundant, and that will inspire them. That will strengthen their motivation for change so that they embrace abundance themselves. So, showing up looking poor, or looking like you don't care, and you don't have to dress up or look good or anything like that, I don't think it's really going to increase people's motivation for change. The Course says, only those who have a real and lasting sense of abundance can be truly charitable. So we need that sense of abundance so that we can be truly charitable, so that we can help in guided ways that will actually help, but also, and maybe it's even more important, so that we can bring healing to those people who actually don't really want it, because they're going to be so attracted to our good energy that they're going to start being motivated to want it. I'll take Reverend Ike's statement and adapt it a little bit. I think the best thing you can do for the sick is not be one. Physician, heal thyself is talked about in the Course in Miracles too, and the Bible. Heal ourselves of all of our perceptions of illness or lack or weakness or aging or whatever it is. Identify with our infinite eternal nature and be a living demonstration of the joy and the goodness in your life. And let me tell you, dressing up, it always feels good. That's my talk for today. Thank you very much.
Nel nome del Padre, Figliolo, Spirito Santo. Amen.
Such a separation.
Have you been lonely? Have you been sad? How does it feel to lose such a close one? Have you been mad?